It's a new day on DS9 and Chief O'Brien is slaughtering Cisco at darts. O'Brien says he feels unbeatable, so it's just as well that Cisco is called away by a message from Bajor. A Bajor plot means it's Kira's turn for the spotlight, and Cisco goes to see her shortly thereafter while she's praying for Bareil, the partner who did her dead earlier in the season. If her prayer was for distraction, it comes true. The First Minister of the Bajoran Provisional Government, which has been provisional for a good 3 years now, has gone and done a dead himself. Natural causes from the looks of things, but news of his replacement would make me give him another autopsy just to be sure. The newly appointed First Minister of Bajor is none other than Kai Sin, the Delphic douchebag. It's not a permanent appointment, but Kira's telling Odo later that it might as well be. She's running for the position in next month's election, and nobody's standing against her. She is the bearer of peace with the Cardigans after all, at least to everybody who doesn't know it was really Bareil. That this would essentially turn her into a monarch with control of both the government and the church doesn't seem to be causing concern in anybody, except the people who actually know her. It comes as somewhat of a surprise then when Kai Sin decides to visit Kira out of the blue. Kira isn't in the mood for diplomacy as she was just trying to pray for Bareil again, and Kai Sin's actions largely contributed to his death, but she is the Kai, so Kira can't just throw her out. She's here because she wants something, this being her standard motivation, and in this case it's getting Kira to act as a negotiator. Pretty fucking bold given how that ended for the last guy, but again, she is the Kai. The negotiations in question are with some farmers. They were given equipment to make their soil fertile, poisoning it being a gift from the Cardigans during the occupation. Kai Sin says they're now refusing to return them for use in another area, and Kira might be able to help as she knows the guy in charge of those farmers. SHAKAAR was the leader of her resistance group during the occupation, and that means she knows him well enough to believe that he wouldn't have refused unless there was a good reason. Perhaps negotiating with him will give her an excuse to find out what it is. Kira doesn't think much of the soil here from the looks of things, but that didn't stop whoever owns the place ploughing it. She's welcomed inside by the guy who greets her, presumably the titular SHAKAAR. Kira's become something of a figurehead for their old resistance cell, according to him. He and 2 other former members have been watching her career with no small amount of admiration. Kira's surprised to hear they're farmers too, and more so to learn they'll be here in a few hours. Kira tries to broach the reason she's here before they arrive, but SHAKAAR already knows and asks for time to think. Let's give him some and catch up with the B-plot. Dax is O'Brien's latest victim, and Quark is now taking bets after getting wind of his winning streak. He's so invested that he talks O'Brien out of using a holosuite tomorrow for kayaking so he doesn't risk an injury. Being reminded how impressive his winning streak is plugs into O'Brien's pride, and he agrees to play darts again tomorrow instead. Back to the farm we go, and we're all reminiscing about past adventures. It becomes some friendly taunting about crop yields, which, in turn, sparks talk of how toxic the soil is here. That's why they're against giving back the equipment to purify it, which is fair when you add that they were told they'd have the gizmos for a year, and it's only been 2 months. That was according to the First Minister who just carked it though, and Kai Sin thinks they'd be better used making farmland for export crops. Kira can see the logic in that plan and how becoming an exporter would help improve Bajor's standing in the galactic community, and suggests talking to Kai Sin directly to work out a deal. SHAKAAR agrees, despite thinking it will be pointless. Kai Sin is equally unimpressed, hearing that the problem hasn't simply gone away as perhaps something she's no longer used to, and she dismisses Kira after agreeing to tell SHAKAAR that she'll meet with him. Agreeing to tell him is not the same as agreeing to actually meet him though, at least as far as Kai Sin is concerned. That must be why some Bajoran popo arrive while Kira's delivering the message to SHAKAAR and try to arrest him. He's disinclined to go with them, and when it comes to blows, Kira is of the same opinion. SHAKAAR tells her to go back to DS9 while she still has a chance to talk her way out of it, but Kira now considers Kai Sin to be even more on her shit list than she was before. As Kira and her friends unpack weapons in a cave, holdovers from the occupation presumably, we learn that Kai Sin being on Kira's shit list is clearly mutual. All the police in the area are on the lookout for she and SHAKAAR, with more bodies and equipment on the way. The authorities have also occupied his land to look for the soil equipment they wanted, but SHAKAAR's already shifted them somewhere else. Of more concern is news that other former members of their resistance group have been nabbed by the law. Whether that happened before or after one of Kira's old friends started sending out calls to reform the cell isn't known, but the ones they have been able to contact have made themselves scarce to join up later. Hiding in the outskirts is something they did very well back in the old days, and SHAKAAR thinks any former resistance members who joined the police are unlikely to work very hard at capturing former colleagues, especially ones who were just trying to get on with farming before Kai Sin stuck her oar in. We'll leave them to it and revisit the B-plot. O'Brien's playing a Vulcan, or deep cover Romulan, or even deeper cover Founder, but he's winning and that's the important part. Or at least he is, until Quark tries to hand him a drink and O'Brien reaching back causes him to cry out in pain. Bashir's there to check him over, with his professional opinion being that he's fucked it up good and proper. Off he goes for surgery, leaving a bemused Quark to pay the challenger on a technicality. Back on Bajor, Kai Sin has called Sisko for a visit, and when I say visit, I do of course mean that she wants something, and it must be something big too, as she's laying the pleasantries on pretty thick. SHAKAAR and company have eluded capture for 2 whole weeks now, and even worse, news of his struggle is starting to receive public support. So much so that Kai Sin has started slapping martial law all over the place, like the dictatorial arsehole she is. Even she can see this as a bad look though, which is why she wants Sisko to send in Federation troops instead. Sisko tells her to balls, this being one of the few situations where our old friend the Prime Directive is working in his favour, as it's an internal political matter and the Federation simply can't get involved. He does tell her that she's risking a civil war to make a point though, perhaps believing his words don't constitute interference. Or perhaps it's because he knew she'd ignore him anyway. SHAKAAR broke the law, so he has to pay. Okay, that law was only invoked because she backed out of a prior arrangement and screwed him, but what's the point in wearing a crown if you can't decide which pawns to sacrifice? SHAKAAR and his friends have no intention of being anybody's pawns, and some old resistance tricks are helping them along, but sooner or later they're going to run out of luck. The people now following them are very good at the job, and many know the terrain here too. SHAKAAR thinks it's time to move to a different region, but his friends have had their fill of running and want to let their pursuers know they mean business. He's not sold on the idea, but agrees to it anyway, and they lead the followers into a dead end while watching them from cliffs. It's all working perfectly until SHAKAAR and Kira realise they can't pull the trigger. Everything to this point has been so familiar that they've been running on autopilot, but seeing a Bajoran in their sights has stopped them dead. On the plus side, Kira's recognised the leader as Linares, another former resistance fighter from a different cell. Perhaps that'll help when Kira and SHAKAAR make themselves visible to him and approach. The exchange starts out well at least, as Linares knows SHAKAAR from his work in the Resistance. In fact, he had a brother in a labour camp that SHAKAAR's cell liberated, a notoriously brutal establishment that we've heard about in a previous episode. Linares has got the sense to realise something more is going on based on the lack of shits Kira and SHAKAAR are giving, and correctly guesses that he's walked into a trap. Linares makes it clear that he's not simply going to surrender though, and SHAKAAR suspected as much. See, SHAKAAR knows Linares' name from a particularly audacious raid against the Cardigans, and showing that he knows about it establishes mutual respect. All of which nearly goes straight down the shitter when one of Linares' men opens fire, despite being given direct orders to the contrary. He's relieved of his weapon and taken away, while Kira comments that the next fuck-up like that will leave a lot of corpses, and potentially be the start of something that makes significantly more. This is a prospect that none of them want, which means it's time to find a better way. The better way involves Linares bringing Kira and SHAKAAR to Kai Sin's office. Her gloating is as full-throated as it is short-lived, as rather than having been captured, SHAKAAR's here to tell her that he's entering the election to become First Minister. He's already got Linares' vote, and all of the other army detachments they've spoken to agree. Kai Sin is still free to enter the election herself if she wants, of course, but that will result in the rest of the planet finding out that she nearly started a civil war over some soil. All's well that ends well, and Kira's back on DS9. She's telling Sisko that none of the other recently announced candidates stand a chance at beating SHAKAAR, especially after he received a personal endorsement from Kai Sin herself. That certainly doesn't mean Kai Sin is likely to forget what just happened, but as he's a former resistance fighter, at least he already knows how to sleep with one eye open. Sisko leaves her to finish praying for Bareil, but it seems she's finally managed to come to terms with the loss, so we'll leave the viewer to consider what, or possibly who, might have made that happen until the next adventure. Kai Sin's back, and she's doing Kai Sin things once more, any challenge to her authority stamped on, any personal slight turned into an all-consuming grudge. She also lives up to her moniker of the Delphic douchebag again, attributing her despotic behaviour to overcoming a test from the prophets. It's lucky we viewers live in a world where nobody believes the gods would send such an obviously self-serving arsehole to perform their will. It's a rare loss for her on this occasion, though, things having gone regrettably well for her of late. Becoming Kai and having a peace treaty with the Cardigans attributed to her have helped her no end, though I suppose she's run out of semi-regular characters to shit on in the process, now that Bareil's a cyborg corpse. There's no narrative payoff in her winning against people we've only just met. Speaking of which, we've another delve into Kira's past with SHAKAAR and her former resistance cell fighters. The others have all managed to put their lives behind them and become farmers, much to Kira's disbelief with two of them, and that gives us an insight into her. For them, the resistance was a means to an end, the fight to regain a chance at a normal life. For Kira, it was all she ever knew, which likely explains why she joined the Bajoran militia once it was over. They were there for a purpose. She was there to find one. That ties in with the difficulty she's had previously in redirecting herself to a diplomatic position, something repeated here with how easily she was able to switch back to guerrilla mode. Perhaps I'm being a touch unfair there, though, as the others had no real trouble adopting those roles again either. SHAKAAR might have resisted parts of it, like the prospect of open conflict, but not so much that he surrendered. Perhaps that's why he decided to move to politics instead, a chance to fight the enemies of a free Bajor, including the Bajoran ones, without the ethical concerns of there being guns involved. Quite whether that will prove to be as bloodless as he'd like, given how such things have turned out for Kira in the past, is another matter, and that was without the influence of Kai Sin making things worse. He'll have an ally in Kira at least, the two of them having been paired together, with indicators that you could generously call hints. The symbolism of Kira still carrying a literal torch for Bareil felt about as subtle as a foghorn, and extinguishing it at the end is similarly blunt, but it does the job, I guess. We've been shown in no uncertain terms that Kira is back on the romance menu, and a comment from SHAKAAR about missing her the most shows where they plan on taking that. Let's end with a look at Kai Sin's request to Sisko, shall we? After failing to hunt down SHAKAAR, she asks for a ground force from the Federation to do the job for her. Did she really believe that was an option? Is she so ignorant of the Federation and its laws that she thought this was something she could get? It's not impossible, and she could genuinely be that uninformed on the Federation's aversion to intervention. Or possibly she's learned how Sisko treated that rule the last time it cropped up in regards to Bajor at the start of Season 2, where he chose to ignore it and do whatever the fuck he wanted. Perhaps she was hoping for a similar response from him here, and thought Kira being involved might influence that decision. The more likely option, I think, is one of her covering her ass. With Sisko's response, she can now truthfully go to her people and say that the Federation refused to help them. Depending on how bad things got, she could even suggest the subversive elements causing trouble on Bajor are supplied by outside influences, the sort of influences who stand by and do nothing while honest, hard-working Bajorans suffer through the unfortunate but necessary peacekeeping actions that she's been forced to order. If there's one real skill she's proven she has so far, it's making her choices somebody else's fault. End of episode.
That's it, I'm done. I don't care who this Mr. Morden prick is or what he's done. The best lesson you can learn in life is knowing when to move on, and we're there.
I hear what you're saying, and I understand why you'd feel that way, but what if I told you I had a guaranteed way of seeing that security footage?
Honestly, I'd probably kick you in the dick.
How would the logistics of that work?
I'd find a way. We can make it the plot arc for all the credit skits in Season 4. Don't test me, son. I'll do it.
I believe you, but will you at least hear me out?
Fine. What have you got?
We ask Siegel Ducat.
One question. Are you out your bloody tree?
No, think about it. Once he hears this is something everybody here is trying to stop, he'll want to do it. Any chance to screw these guys is a win for him.
Oh, okay. Let's just for a second say that I'm entertaining this idea. What's the plan?
Give him a call and ask him for a backdoor to the system. There's no way he didn't install one during his time here.
All right, fine. Against me better judgment and knowing that we're reaching the end of the season and that's when the guy who writes these advances the plot, we'll give your idea a go. Tentative woof.